The Pseudo Challenge of the Divine Origin of the Quran by Dr. A. Ahmed. This article refutes the false claim of the Muslims that the Quran was the greatest book ever written in human history by an illiterate author like the Prophet Muhammad, who did neither know how to read nor to write. In that way, they say it had surpassed Greek history, which had been written by the blind Greek author Homer. The poet Homer is credited with being the first to write down the epic stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and the impact of his tales continues to reverberate through Western culture. According to Muslims, the Quran of the illiterate Muhammad also surpassed the great symphonies of the deaf musician Beethoven. Ludwig van Beethoven is widely regarded as the greatest composer who ever lived, in no small part because of his ability, unlike any before him, to translate feeling into music. His most famous compositions included Symphony No. 5 in C minor, 1808, Symphony No. 7 in A major, 1813, and Symphony No. 9 in D minor, 1824. Nevertheless, Muslims believe the illiterate Muhammad was neither a great genius like the blind Greek poet Homer, nor an extraordinary human being like the greatest deaf music composer Ludwig van Beethoven. But he has been assisted and inspired to write the miraculous Quran by the omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscience, the Almighty God Allah, creator of the 7 heavens and 6 earths. Therefore, the composer of the Quran challenged the Arabs of his time, who composed the most beautiful 7 poetic mu'allaqat, to produce one surah or one verse like that heavenly inspired book, but they could not. Before Islam, the Arabs delighted in the love, romance, and beauty of the woman. They wrote the renowned 7 poems known as mu'allaqat. These were overtly sweet and deliberate writings of love. The poetic writings were so loved and revered by the Arabs of the pre-Islamic period that they began to hang these popular poems on the holy Kaaba at Mecca city, which is known today as the house of Allah. Islam outlawed, loved, and destroyed that golden period of Arabian poetry, reflecting the intimacy between a man and a woman. Muslim scholars claim that this Quranic challenge has never been made or refuted throughout the 14 centuries of Islam. Through this article, I would attempt to refute the so-called challenge of the Quran and show that the challenge was a pseudo in nature, and the people of Mecca had ridiculed the Prophet Muhammad for making such a baseless challenge. Islam apparently has 2 contradictory messages, peaceful and violent. As we shall show below, the so-called peaceful message is a pseudo message, but the violent message is the core teaching of the Quran and the Hadiths, and hence it is the true and final message of Islam. According to all schools of Sharia, the followers of the later message are the only true Muslims. The so-called peaceful message refers to the 13-year period when Muhammad lived in Mecca. He was then a fledgling leader with only a few followers. For 13 years, only 72 people believed in him and became his followers. During this period, he had not yet formulated his brutal draconian laws, later on became known as Sharia law. He had not created his Mujahideen fighters and had not yet declared jihad against infidels. His violent message refers to the last 10 years of his time in Medina city. According to all Muslim scholars and the four founders of the four schools of Sharia, Shafi'i, Hanafi, Hanbali, and Maliki, the Medina period had abrogated it and cancelled all prior peaceful approaches and made Islam compulsory for all humanity. Merriam-Webster dictionary defines abrogate as to abolish by authoritative action, to make null, and to create and to treat non-existent. It lists abrogate synonyms: abolish, annul, cancel, dissolve, invalidate, negate, nullify, rescind, roll back, strike down, and vacate. From this, we can conclude that the Medina message, the violent message, has abrogated it, which means invalidating and cancelling the Mecca message, the so-called peaceful message. Consequently, Islam has only one message, and that message is the violent message which has been taught by the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad during the 10 years of Medina. Although the Meccan period had been abrogated by the Medina period, still the verses of Mecca remain in the Quran. According to all Muslim scholars, those abrogated verses are to be used only for recitation, but no Sharia law should be made out of them. Nonetheless, many Muslims, especially those who are living in the West, quote those verses to show that Islam is a peaceful religion. This duality of abrogated verses and those verses that abrogated them made it easy for Muslims to argue for both peaceful and violent approaches. Those who want to show that Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance use the abrogated verses of the Quran to prove their point and deliberately suppress the Medina verses and hadiths, while those who want to justify jihad for the spread of Islam or to fight against the so-called enemies of Islam and oppress Muslim women, using their sermons and teaching the Medina verses of the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. This inevitably creates confusion among non-Muslims and leads to questions about the nature of true Muslims, terrorists or moderates. The answer to that question should not be sought from either side. The Quran and the hadiths of Muhammad succinctly favor the terrorists. The 13 years Muhammad spent in Mecca preaching his new religion was a total failure. He failed miserably in his jealousy of the religions of the Jews and Christians. So he tried to create one based on the Judeo-Christian model. He claimed to be a prophet of God like Moses, David, and Jesus, but the Jewish as well as the Christians saw through his farce and flatly rejected him. Even the pagans of Mecca, who worshipped idols, refused to believe in him. He merely won 73 people, and most of them were his immediate relatives, friends, and very few slaves. Needless to say, he was ridiculed, and his message was flatly rejected by the people of Mecca. Even some of his 73 followers who immigrated to Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, due to persecution, had rejected his message and returned to Mecca when they heard that Muhammad composed the so-called satanic verses, which incorporated it in the worship of idols in Islam. See Surah An-Najm 53 verses 19 to 22. According to accounts taken from the Muslim commentator Al-Tabari, Muhammad went through a time of weakness and compromise with the Mecca pagans by acknowledging the existence of three pagan goddesses alongside Allah, namely Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. The Arabian goddesses are mentioned in Surah Al-Najm 53, verses 19 to 22. As a consequence of this, Muhammad was strongly rebuked by his uncle Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib for compromising with the pagans of Mecca, and hence he recanted his admission and considered those verses as an inspiration of the devil, satanic verses. The polytheists of Mecca were able to see through his message. It was clear he was no prophet because he had failed to perform the obligatory miracles or prophecies required of a prophet. Moreover, the stories of the Jewish prophets and the ancient Arab folklore he incorporated in his Quran were all known to the Arabs of Mecca. The stories of the Jewish prophets, which he claimed to have known through direct revelation from God, were a mixture of true stories mentioned in the Jewish Holy Scripture, the Old Testament, and false stories mentioned in the Jewish Talmud, Jewish commentaries on the Old Testament, which included legends and fables. Most of the Talmudic stories were created in the 2nd century and 3rd century AD and were meant to enhance the characters of the Jewish prophets. Muhammad, not knowing the truth from legend, indiscriminately included both in his Quran. He also incorporated in his Quran some Christian legends, like the fictional story of the 7 sleepers, known in Islam as the people of the cave or Ahl al-Kahf, and the stories about the childhood of Jesus, which are mentioned in some apocryphal gospels, like the Gospel of the Nativity of Mary, the history of Joseph the carpenter, and the infancy Gospel of Thomas, and other rejected Gospels. For example, in the infancy Gospel of Thomas, one of the episodes involves Jesus making clay birds, which he then proceeds to bring to life, an act also attributed to Jesus in the Quran. See Surah 5, verse 110. Furthermore, the Quran included many false accounts about the childhood of Mary, which is mentioned in the Gospel of the Nativity of Mary. Those accounts are preserved and believed until today by the Syrian Orthodox Church and the Egyptian Coptic Church. Without knowing their authenticity and origins, Muhammad added them to his Quran. Muhammad was much influenced by the Arab Christians and Jews of his time. He traveled many times to the Levant, Greater Syria, today Syria, Jordan, and Palestine, or Israel, which was while he was working as hireling on the trade caravans of his fairest wife Khadija. She was the one who convinced him to make his false claim of prophethood. During those trips, he heard many stories from the Arab Christians and Jews of Levant. The composer of the Quran at this stage did not read the canonized 66 books of the Old Testament and the New Testament, but depended on folklore told by commoners by the wayside. Muhammad's ignorance was evident when the residents of Mecca sought the help of some of the Jews of Medina. The Jewish rabbis of Medina told the Meccans to ask Muhammad 3 questions to test his knowledge. It was an open exam for the Meccans because the questions and answers were revealed to them by the Jewish rabbis. The Meccans asked Muhammad to tell them what he knew about Zulqarnain, Alexander the Great, the 7 sleepers of the cave, and the nature of the spirit. Muhammad promised to answer the following morning after God revealed his will through the angel Gabriel. Instead of a day, he took 14 days to answer the three questions. Most probably, he spent 2 weeks searching for answers among his relatives, friends, and other people. Even Waraq ibn Nawfal was clueless. When his God revealed answers came back, his ignorance and falsehood were exposed. He could no longer claim to be the prophet of God. With this abject failure in tow, he migrated and fled to Medina, and there he changed the peaceful approach into a violent one, which made the acceptance of Islam compulsory for everyone. Muhammad's first two answers are in the Quran, Surah number 18, which is known as Surah Al-Kahf. Concerning the 7 sleepers of the cave, he failed to tell the number of the sleepers and added a dog to their number, which was not part of the original legend. He mentioned in the Quran that some people testify that there were 3 sleepers, others swearing that there were 5, and even others 7, with God only knowing that number. Notice that this is supposed to be God speaking. In other words, God is telling Muhammad and the Meccans that only God knows their number. God guessed that they slept for 309 years, but only God knows for how long they slept. Surah Al-Kahf 18, verses 8 to 26. God is saying, as far as I know, they slept for 309 years, but only God knows how long they slept. It is hilarious. The story of the 7 sleepers of the cave was an ancient legend mentioned by a Syrian Christian bishop called Jacob, who lived in the Syrian town of Sarok. Jacob 1851 to 1852 to 451 to 521 AD. Derive it from an early Greek source. Aristotle mentioned it in his writings too. This story made its way to Europe and became a well-known fable. Washington Irving adopted it in his famous novel Rip Van Winkle, 1819. Neither the New Testament nor the Old Testament ever mentioned such a story. However, the Syrian legend said there were 7 sleepers and slept in a cave for 200 years. According to the legend, there were 7 Christians who fled from the Roman persecutions at the time of the Emperor Decius and took refuge in a cave in Ephesus city. God miraculously causes them to sleep for 200 years. When they wake up and returned to the city, they were astonished to see the Christian churches displaying crosses everywhere. The God of the Quran did not seem to know their number and the duration of their sleep or where they lived. Muslim historians and scholars have great trouble identifying the legendary figure mentioned in the Quran as Dhul Qarnayn. The majority of traditional and modern Muslim scholars have generally equated Dhul Qarnayn with Alexander the Great, Alexander the Third of Macedon, 356 to 323 BC. Accordingly, modern Muslim scholars find difficulty in identifying Dhul Qarnayn with Alexander the Great. In more recent times, some Muslim scholars have suggested other alternatives. For example, that Dhul Qarnayn might be Cyrus the Third of Persia, 576 530 BC. Both Alexander and Cyrus were pagans, and the Dhul Qarnayn of the Quran was portrayed as the righteous man and a prophet who spoke directly to God. To solve this riddle, some new scholars come up with a third alternative. An Islamic scholar known as Muhammad Akbar claims his research based on the Quran reveals that Dhul-Qarnayn is a second name of King Solomon, just like Jacob is later called Israel. However, there is not a single source, either Jewish or Christian, has ever mentioned that King Solomon was also called Dhul-Qarnayn. Yet, other modern scholars identified him with the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, 575-641 AD. Alexander the Great was known to the Arabs of Mecca and the Jews of Medina as Dhul-Qarnayn, the two-horned one, because he used to put two horns on his head and because his image on his coins appears with horns. Alexander the Great was known to the Arabs of Mecca and the Jews of Medina as Dhul-Qarnayn, the two-horned one, because he used to put two horns on his head and because his image on his coins appears with horns. While attempting to answer the second question, Muhammad's Quran made Alexander the Great the prophet of Allah who spoke directly with God. See Surah Ahl al-Kahf 18 verses 83 to 98. The second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, considered Alexander the Great or Dhul-Qarnayn an angel of God. Alexander the Great lived and died as a polytheist. He burned down the entire city of Ephesus because its inhabitants refused to allow him to offer animals as sacrifices to his idols. According to the Quran, Alexander the Great was able to reach the end of the world and saw the sun setting in a hot, muddy well. So according to the Allah of Muhammad, the sun has a setting place at the end of the world, and at nightfall rests in a muddy hot well. The Quran records that Alexander the Great had built a huge wall between two big mountains and imprisoned the two demons, Yajuj and Majuj, biblical Gog and Magog, and their people. This last fable was taken from obscure Persian traditions. References to Alexander may also be found in the Persian traditions. The same traditions from the Pseudo were combined in Persia with Sassanid Persian ideas about Alexander the Great in the Alexandernas story of Dhul-Qarnayn mentioned in the Quran. In this tradition, Alexander built a wall of iron and melted it copper, to which Gog and Magog and their followers are confined. Many Muslim preachers preach in their mosque that those two mountains, the high great wall and the imprisoned two gigantic demons and their people are still there. Even so, no one has yet to have seen or discovered these mountains. The renowned 14th century Muslim traveler Ibn Battuta had confused the Great Wall of China with that built by Dhul-Qarnayn. Regarding the last question about the nature of the spirit, the Quran said, only Allah knows its nature. See Surah Al-Isra 17 verse 85. Either the Allah of Muhammad was fed up with him or just decided not to guess any more answers, having already put his false prophet in an embarrassing situation. So when his three answers, which are supposedly revealed by God through his faithful angel Gabriel, are recorded in the Quran in Surah 17 and Surah 18, Al-Kahf and Isra, Muhammad failed miserably to give correct answers and hence exposed his falsehoods. Regardless, Muhammad refused to admit to his lies. Up to this point, he failed to prove his claim as the prophet of God, since he could not perform any miracles, could not utter a single prophecy, and showed considerable latitude in his creativity creativity with historical facts. Instead of accepting defeat, Muhammad challenged the people of Mecca to produce some verses or a one single surah like his Quran. Through this challenge, Muhammad committed the fallacy of Betisha Principi, begging the question. The fallacy of Betisha Principi is committed when someone attempts to prove a proposition based on a premise that itself requires proof. Of course, such a challenge mainly exposes him even further. Based on this pseudo challenge, Muslim scholars collectively agreed that Muhammad had never performed any miracles, with the book of the Quran as his singular miracle, as to speak. Nevertheless, the Meccans did not see any greatness or a miraculous nature within the pages of the Quran. For them, the Quran was a historical manuscript which lacked any claim to mastery of writing. It is essentially a repetitive book lacking honesty and historical authenticity, without proper chronological order, full of contradictions, full of confusion, full of grammatical mistakes, full of legends and fables, and full of plagiarism. Many of its verses went missing after the death of Muhammad and have never been recovered to this day. According to the testimonies of prominent followers of Islam, such as Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, Umar ibn al-Khattab, Uthman ibn Affan, and others, many verses and complete surahs were lost forever. The author of the Quran, Allah of Muhammad, has confused many historical stories and events. Just to mention few, the well-known confusion of Mary, the mother of Jesus, with Mary or Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron and daughter of Imran, the confusion of the minister of Haman of the king of Persia, Ahasuerus, mentioned in the book of Esther, with the minister of King Pharaoh of Egypt at the time of Moses, and the exodus of the children of Israel through the divided sea, and the confusion of the father of Abraham, Terah, with his chief servant, Eliezer. The claim of the Quran that when Moses went to the mountain of God to receive the Ten Commandments, his brother Aaron was deceived by a Samaritan who convinced him to make a calf for the children of Israel, falls apart when it was shown that the city of Samaria did not come into existence until hundreds of years later. How could there be a Samaritan man at the time of Moses and Aaron, when it is well-known historical fact that the city of Samaria did not yet come into existence until the children of Israel conquered the Canaanites and took possession of the promised land, present-day Israel. After the death of King Solomon, his kingdom was divided into the southern kingdom known as Judea. Its capital was Jerusalem, and the northern kingdom called Israel, and its capital was Samaria. After the Babylonian captivity, the people of Samaria were called by the Jewish, they were called The people of Samaria were called by the Jewish Samaritans. Remember the parable of the Good Samaritan, which was told by Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. After the death of Waraq ibn Nawfal, the message of the Quran underwent drastic changes. The new verses of the Quran lost their magical tune and poetical charm. They were no longer short and full of rhythms. They became lengthy and boring. They were painted in plain vernacular Arabic, the type written by laymen. Before the days of Warqa ibn Nawfal and Khadija bint Khuwailid, the only source of the new religion was the Quran. But now a new source was introduced known as the Hadiths, sayings and deeds of the Prophet Muhammad. They are also considered to be divinely revealed and have the same religious and legal binding as the verses of the Quran. The Quran also endorsed the divine origin of the hadiths and said about Muhammad, he does not speak out of Lord desires. It is not but in inspiration inspired. Surah An-Najm 53 verses 3 to 4. Muhammad could now dictate his new laws by using everyday, ordinary street language which is spoken by anybody. The initial peaceful approach was abrogated and replaced by a violent approach. Accepting or rejecting the message of the new religion was no more a matter of choice. Everyone in Arabia had to become Muslim or suffer death. After this new development, Muhammad claimed that he had been commanded by Allah to fight and kill people until they accepted it, his new religion. An exemption was made for the people of the book if they agreed to pay the jizya in gold. Nonetheless, the encounter of Muhammad with the Jews revealed that this exemption, if any, was rarely implemented. Everywhere his followers went, they killed Christians and enslaved and raped their women and children and confiscated their properties and occupied their lands. For a short period, Khadija, the first wife of the Prophet Muhammad, supported her husband and encouraged him to continue his mission as a God-sent prophet. From this point, Muhammad started to recreate his verses for the Quran. He decided the direction and the content of his message. Should he continue the peaceful approach initiated by Warqa ibn Nawfal or change his direction and invade his course of action? Muhammad decided to turn the tide and proceed in the opposite direction. He was clear that Waraqa's peaceful approach did not gain many followers. The people of Mecca only ridiculed him and flatly rejected his message. They told him to his face that he was an impostor, sorcerer, and madman. They also told him the stories of the Jewish and Arab prophets who were already known to them, which he mentioned in the Quran, were already known to them. Some of them began to attack him physically. There was a story of a powerful Arab woman who came with an axe to kill him because he insulted her through his Quran. In fact, after Warqa died, the Quran lost its charm and moral standards, beginning to use vulgar language in the context of its opponents. For example, one man called Muhammad a madman. The Quran responded it by calling that man son of a bitch. Surah Al-Qalam 68 verses 13. After the death of his first wife Khadija, Muhammad suddenly became a violent and tyrannical ruler. With the death of Khadija, the spirit of Jezebel lost control of the new prophet, and the violent spirit of the Babylonian god Baal or Marduk took over. Baal, also called El, was known to the polytheist Arabs as Ilah and Allah. The timid Muhammad suddenly became violent and hostile. His message became the message of a tyrant who dictates his no-answered terms to his people. He began to assassinate anyone who disagreed with him or composed poems to criticize him. He even arranged the assassinations of two poetess women who composed verses criticizing his violent nature, Asma bint Marwan and Kirfa. He also began to marry many women, and in a short period, he gathered a large number of harems for his deviant sexual satisfaction, which could only be satisfied by the fear of hell. He even married a 6-year-old female child named Aisha and raped her when she was 9 years old. The, cor- the correct Islamic tradition says that he had sexual molestation with her for 3 years, known as mufakhaza or tying, when she was between the ages of 6 and 9, before he began raping her. This is called in Arabic mufakhazat al-siqar, or a tying or a masturbation with the thighs of a child. Mufakhaza is an evil Arab male custom in which an adult man places his penis between the thighs of a naked female child and masturbates on her until he ejaculates and his semen runs down her legs. In her time, Khadija kept him under close watch and did not allow him to take any other wife. That embediment, like many others, had been removed. Many non-Muslim scholars struggle to understand the split personality of the Quran. Why does a book supposedly inspired by God contain within it two contradictory messages? Some verses teach a peaceful approach, and some verses dictate violence. It is not surprised that many scholars are still frustrated by the irreconcilable messages of the Meccan period and the Medina period. Muslim scholars invented a doctrine known as abrogation or a nasikh wa mansukh to reconcile the split personality of the Quran. They simply claim that the later message of Medina abrogated or invalidated the one before it. They argued that when Islam was weak and Muhammad had a few followers, God granted it freedom of choice. But when Islam gained strength because of its many followers, freedom was henceforth forbidden, and Islam was the only acceptable religion to God. For an outsider, this solution further complicates the issue it tries to solve. How can God say initially no compulsory religion and then turn around and say kill infidels wherever you find them? Why would God's inspired word, which commands his prophet to fight and kill people until they bear witness that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is messenger? Well, such difficulty does not arise for the person who understands that the Quran has two contradictory messages because it has two sources or two composers, Waraq ibn Nawfal and Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Muslims will strongly reject such a claim, but no one of them can explain or justify the obvious contradiction between the verses of Mecca and the verses of Medina. What makes the religion of Muhammad different from all other religions of the world is its violent message and misogynistic teachings. His teachings degraded the woman and placed her in a status lower than the animal. It introduced many new teachings alien to the tenets of other religions, such as jihad for spreading Islam by the sword, the law of apostasy, polygamy, the concept of right hand possessed female slaves, slavery, vengeance of paradise, cruel hatred towards non-believers, and of course, anti-Semitism. Before the term was invented, Muhammad persecuted and killed the Jewish and called them brothers of apes and pigs. He exiled all Jewish out of Arabia and confiscated their homes and properties. He showed cruel hatred toward the Jewish. Muhammad proves with no outside help that he embodies the values of the Antichrist. He also showed that he was completely controlled by the devil through the violent religion he and his followers spread all over the world, resulting in the deaths of 80 million Hindus and 60 million Christians during the Islamic conquest or invasions. The Quran is a collection of verses composed by Waraq ibn Nawfal and Muhammad on various occasions during 25 years of preaching this new Arab religion, 13 years in Mecca and 10 years in Medina. Some of them are short and in poetic form, and some as lengthy sermons. For example, the longest surah of Al-Baqarah, surah number 2, and has 286 verses, except one single verse, verse 281, supposedly revealed during the farewell pilgrim, was composed in Medina. It also includes the single longest verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 282. This verse is considered to be the most misogynistic and offensive verse against women because it states that the testimony of one woman in court equals the testimonies of two. It states that the testimony of one man in court equals the testimony of two women. 90% of the Islamic draconian laws, Sharia laws, are taken from the Medinan verses, the long surahs, and the hadiths of the Prophet of Islam. Islam did not become a distinct religion until Muhammad fled to Medina and began to formulate his new laws, formed his mujahideen fighters, and started to attack other tribes and cities, and later on countries. The present Quran has neither a beginning nor an ending. Its verses are scattered in the book chaotically. There is no way for the reader of the Quran to know which verse came before which verse and which surah was supposedly revealed before which surah. The verses and the surahs are not arranged in chronological order. The stories and events of the Bible, the story and events of the Holy Bible are arranged in chronological and sequential order. However, the stories and events mentioned in the Quran do not tell which story or event happened first or where they took place. There is no chronological order, no geographical location, and no historical information. It is just like a story in that its beginning is put at its end. Its end is placed in its middle, and its middle is scattered chaotically all over the book. Sometimes it tells you about Moses and Aaron, then it jumps to the story of Adam and Eve, and suddenly it shifts to Noah and the flood. Then returns to Moses and Pharaoh. Suddenly, Abraham breaks all the idols of King Nimrod. Then Jesus performs a miracle when he is just 1 day old, and that by speaking perfect Hebrew language. After that, it goes to David and Goliath. Then it jumps to the story of King Solomon, hearing an ant speaking to other ants in whatever language the ants supposedly speak to each other. And also, it tells you that King Solomon is speaking to a Ifrit or a Jinni, demon or a devil, and then goes back to a story of Adam and how Satan is punished by Allah because he refused to prostrate to Adam. Then it picks up a story of an Arab prophet called Saleh from the Arab folklore, who had a she-camel that was born without a father or a mother, but it came out of a rock. Then it tells you about how Abraham and his son Ishmael built the Black Kaaba, the Black House of Allah in Mecca. Historians and archaeologists prove that Mecca did not come into existence until the 4th century AD, almost 2,500 years after the time of Abraham and his sons Ishmael and Isaac. Then you hear about Muhammad's encounter with a group of the desert jinn demons who hear the recitation of the Quran and like it and immediately embraced Islam and became Muslim devils, and so on and so on. The Quran is a fairy tale book rather than a religious text. If it isn't for the hadiths and many commentaries, no one could understand a single page of that obscure book. Not one of Muhammad's hadiths or his biography was written down during his time on earth. It was verbally handed down for 200 years after his death. Muslim scholars claim that for 200 years, the hadiths and biographies of Muhammad and his immediate companions were passed from mouth to mouth and always committed to memory. When Muhammad failed to convince the people of Mecca, he fled to Medina along with his friend Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. He knew that without any divine power, he would not be able to provide the requisite miracles or prophecies expected by the inhabitants. Thus, the time for the peaceful approach reached an end, and the new message of Islam now centers on a violent approach. Islam became compulsory and the only acceptable religion to Allah. If Muhammad had not declared jihad against infidels, made Islam compulsory for everyone, allowed his followers to possess the women, children, slaves, properties, cattle, and lands of unbelievers or infidels, and come up with the law of apostasy, we would not see a single Muslim today. The sword of Islam and the violence of its prophet and followers recognized are the two magical powers that should be as surviving up to the present day. Perhaps it is a little clearer now that the moderate phase of Islam, based on the verses of the Meccan period, simply did not exist as a bona fide religion and was a complete failure, even in the eyes of its founder. It was only after his relocation, when he fled to Medina, did Muhammad's plans started to resemble a religion with rigid and strict religious laws, which evolved to become the basis for the present-day Sharia law. At this defining stage, Islam divorced its roots, and it is claimed as the successor of Judaism and Christianity. Muhammad now accused the followers of the two Abrahamic religions or Judeo-Christian followers of corrupting their scriptures, hence deserving of persecution and death. He then began to borrow and incorporate in his Quran the religious rituals of the pagan Arabs of Mecca, especially the practices of the Hajj rituals. He also changed the Qibla direction for Muslim prayers from Jerusalem to Kaaba of Mecca, also called the Black House of Allah. By the way, the black flag or the banner of ISIS and Al-Qaeda was the original banner of Muhammad and his followers. In the beginning, Muhammad tried to please the Jewish, and that is why he prayed toward their holy city, Jerusalem. When the Jews refused to accept him as the prophet of Yahweh, Jehovah, he returned to his polytheist people and adopted their holy city, Mecca. Turned their black Kaaba into the house of his Allah, and accepted all their pagan rituals of the Hajj. He also borrowed the 5 daily prayer systems from the Mandeans in the Quran called the Sabians. Their fasting observance of during Ramadan months and their festival of Fitr, festival of Ramadan, and Nahr, festival of slaughter. The Sabians are mentioned 3 times in the Quran as the people of the book, along with the Jews and Christians. Muhammad even borrowed the fancy concepts of the hoary virgins and beautiful boys of paradise from the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism. Neither the Jewish nor the Christian ever went to Mecca to perform the pagan rituals of the Hajj. They did not perform the 5 compulsory prayers, not the months-long fasting, nor believed in the Zoroastrian virgins of paradise. Neither today nor in the past have the Jews and Christians prayed the way Muslims pray to their Allah. These precepts and rituals are entirely pagan and have absolutely nothing to do with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When Muhammad failed to convince the Jewish and Christian, he simply declared them infidels. Like the blind groping in the dark, Muhammad used whatever fell into his hands to add to his new potpourri religion. He ended up with a cocktail of religions: Arab polytheism, Mandaeanism, Hanafiya, and Zoroastrianism. Accordingly, from those ancient Middle Eastern pagan religions, he borrowed their religious ritual and practice, which formed some of the 5 pillars of Islam: prayer, fasting, and pilgrim, Hajj. He borrowed the rigid doctrine of oneness of God from the Hanafiya sect of Mecca. From Judaism, he incorporated the names and stories of the prophets after emptying them from any doctrinal teachings based on the 10 Commandments, the Sabbath, the Passover, the Pentecost, the priestly office, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the animal sacrifices on the altar for atoning for one's sins, the 70 years of captivity in Babylon, etc. He also vehemently rejected and viciously attacked the main Christian fundamental doctrines, such as the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Christ. He considered the doctrines of the Holy Trinity and the divinity of Jesus Christ as unpardonable blasphemies against God. The negative attitudes of Muhammad towards Christianity and Judaism show that he was totally, completely, and fully inspired by the enemy of the God of these 2 heavenly revealed religions, the devil. Satan used him to the fullness, and through him he attacked the heavenly revealed religions of Judaism and Christianity and tried to destroy them. No wonder his followers considered the Jewish their bitterest enemies and Christians their great rivals and infidels who deserve to be killed. The religion that Muhammad came up with made even the demons rejoice and gladly join it. See Surah Al-Jinn 72 or Surah the Demon 72. Some Muslim scholars attempted to hide the fact that the jinn are demons or devils, and therefore stated that the jinn are neither angels nor devils, biblical fallen angels or evil spirits, but altogether different creatures of God. Howbeit, such false assertion contradicts even the Quran, which calls Satan one of the jinn. The Quran says, "And remember when we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam, so they prostrated except Iblis, Satan. He was one of the jinn. He disobeyed the command of his Lord. Will you then take him, Iblis, and his offspring as protectors and helpers rather than me, while they are enemies to you? What an evil is the exchange for the Zalimun, evildoers." Surah 18, verse 50. The only things that Muhammad borrowed from Judaism and Christianity were the names of their prophets, without showing what those prophets had taught. He deceitfully used the doctrine of the creation of Adam and Eve and the creation of the entire universe as a foundation to build on his work-based concept of salvation. In the Quran, Adam and Eve are not created in the image and likeness of God. They are just like other animals created out of clay. Muhammad did not go beyond Genesis chapter 2. He omitted it. The basic Christian doctrines of the original sin, the fall of man, and the promise that the seed of the woman, Christ, would crush the head of the serpent, Satan, at the cross. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Muhammad hated it, the cross, and therefore in one of his hadiths said when Jesus Christ returned, he would destroy all the crosses and kill all the Christians of the world. Muhammad avoided it, incorporating any doctrines from both the Abrahamic religions. He refused to borrow the Jewish doctrine of atonement and the Christian doctrine of salvation. Of course, these two doctrines complement each other in the sense that the latter is fulfillment of the former. In the Old Testament, Jewish atonement is through the shedding of animal blood once a year through the high priest during Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. In the New Testament, Jesus Christ is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world through the vehicle of his death on the cross and shedding of his blood. And he is our high priest. Muhammad rejected the cross of Christ, the doctrine of salvation, the redemption of mankind through his blood. He also flatly denied the divinity of Christ, the death and resurrection of Jesus, and the Holy Trinity. Therefore, it is not enough to say that Muhammad is no way a prophet of God. One must conclude that he is also Antichrist. Many people believe the cunning and lying Muslims who falsely claim that Islam is part of the Judeo-Christian family or assert Abrahamic religion. Throughout its history and until today, Islam made Muslims sworn enemies to the Jews and Christians. Historians stated that Muslims had killed 60 million Christians during their early invasions of the Christian lands and 80 million Hindus in the Indian subcontinent. When he fled from Mecca to Medina, Muhammad became the leader of two dominant Medinian tribes, Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj. All Medinians except Jewish converted to Islam following their leaders. During this new period, Muhammad turned it 180 degrees and began to dictate a new message. It was in this period that all the evils of Islam came into existence. Jihad, spreading Islam by the sword and killing infidels who refused to accept Muhammad as the prophet and messenger of God, killing the apostates who deserted Islam, and all the misogynistic teachings against women were revealed by the prophet. During these 10 years, every thinkable evil against infidels was sanctioned. They were authorized, legalized, encouraged, and divinized by the Quran and the thousands of hadiths uttered by Muhammad. Roughly, there are 60,000 hadiths. Some Muslim scholars put the number way beyond that. Islam became the only acceptable religion on the entire earth, and anyone daring to refuse the hospitality of the Muslim faith suffered to be killed, with his property, cattle, women, and children to be distributed as war booty among the Muslim mujahideen. Anyone who accepts this religion or inherits it by birth through his father or a mother can only forsake it on pain of death. Accordingly, Muhammad became a ruthless dictator who tortured and killed anyone who refused his new message or dared to criticize or leave his new hodgepodge satanic religion. In Mecca, with his few followers, the verses of the Quran bred the Jewish and Christians and accepted their holy scriptures as divine revelations. In Medina, he found 3 powerful Jewish tribes and dealt with them treacherously. In the beginning, He continued to praise their religion and prophets and formed alliances with them. As he grew in strength with more followers and weaponry acquired through his habitual raids and invasions of other Arab tribes, he accused the Jews of corrupting their holy scriptures and began to kill them. According to the Egyptian Muslim scholar Sayyid Mahmud al-Qimni, when Muhammad decided to immigrate to Mecca, necessity and wisdom required that some verses of the Quran should go before the Muslims to praise the children of Israel and their prophets. The admission that Allah has preferred them to other nations, that in their Torah there is guidance and light, and they should follow what is written in their Torah of Moses. Al-Islamiyat Al-Qimni, year 2001, page 58. Nevertheless, this friendly atmosphere toward the Jews had changed for no other reason except that their alliance was no longer needed after the victory of the Battle of the Great Badr, in which Muslims possessed weapons and great wealth and strength. Al-Qimni, page 589. Initially, by praising the Jewish scriptures and prophets, Muhammad expected the Jews to make room for his mishmash religion or accept him as one of their prophets. But none of that happened. Like the Meccans before him, the Jews of Medina had an Khaybar city flatly rejected him as a false prophet, and not a single one of them had converted to his hocus pocus religion. It is somehow surprising that it was only after the Battle of the Great Badr that Muhammad suddenly made the determination that the Jews have corrupted the original Torah of Moses, and henceforth it became necessary to kill them for changing the verses of Allah. Al-Qimni, page 389. As such, the Jewish tribes of Bani Qunayqa, Bani Qurayza, and Bani Nadir were systematically persecuted and dealt with immediately and swiftly. Bani Qunayqa and Bani Nadir were falsely accused of trivial crimes and exiled from Medina after confiscating their properties and homes. A Muslim woman came with her husband to a Jewish market of the Banu Nadir tribe, and a couple of Jewish boys teased her by exposing her privates. In those days, Arabs had not yet used underwear. They came to know about the use of underwear when they invaded the civilized Coptic Christians of Egypt. The woman's husband killed one of those boys, and he got killed by some Jewish boys. This problem was used by Muhammad as an excuse to punish the entire tribe. After that, he claimed that the angel Gabriel told him that the Jews of Bani Qunayqa were planning to throw a huge rock on your head and kill you while you were sitting under the wall of one of their houses. Hence, based on the so-called revelation of Allah, the second Jewish tribe of Bani Qunayqa were collectively punished and kicked out of Medina after their houses and properties were seized by Muslims. Those two expelling Jewish tribes were forced by Muhammad to leave their homes, cattle, and other properties and march on foot until Palestine, today Israel. So the Prophet Muhammad proved himself to be the Pharaoh of the all, who persecuted the children of Israel and tried to annihilate them, or not different from the one of the most evil tyrants in human history, Adolf Hitler, who attempted it to exterminate the entire Jewish race. However, in his evilness, brutality, destruction, rapes, enslavement, and the number of human causalities, his religion caused Prophet Muhammad surpassed all the combined tyrants and dictators of human history, such like King Nimrod, King Pharaoh, King Herod, Emperor Nero, Emperor Caligula, Emperor Diocletian, Attila the Hun, Khalif Hakim bi Amrullah, Mary Tudor, also called Bloody Mary, Maximilian Prosper, Napoleon Bonaparte, Genghis Khan, Tamerlane, Talat Basha, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Joseph Stalin, Mao Tse-tung, Pol Pot, Saddam Hussein, Idi Amin Dada, and Fidel Castro. No wonder in one of his authentic hadiths, the Prophet Muhammad described himself as Ana Dahuk al-Qattal, which means I am the loving killer. The third Jewish tribe of Bani Qurayza was falsely accused by Prophet Muhammad of treason, and therefore 900 of his men were beheaded in cold blood in front of Muhammad as he sat observing the entire massacre. Then all their women, children, properties, and houses were distributed among the Muslim Mujahideen. In a short period, not a single Jew was left in Medina, the new capital of the emerging Islamic State. Before Muhammad's arrival, Medina was considered to be a Jewish city because two-thirds of its inhabitants were Jewish. According to Al-Qimni, the Prophet knew for sure that the existence of Jewish with heavenly book, a historical heritage, and series of prophecies that followed one after the other mean the existence of continuous denial of his prophethood and inside his city and in mid of his small state. Wherefore, following those quick steps of cleaning Yasrib, Medina, from the Jewish, Hurub Dawlat al-Rasul, Sayyid al-Qimni, year 2001, page 367. The city of the Jewish, Yasrib, after the death of Muhammad was renamed Madinat Rasulallah, which means the city of the messenger of God. Before Muhammad fled from Mecca to Yasrib, the Jews were the majority in Yasrib and controlled all the factories of trade and weaponry. After destroying the last Jewish tribe, Muhammad led his Mujahideen to raid and sack the second Jewish city of Khaybar. The only reason assigned to this overt hostility was the claim that Allah had given the Jewish city to the Muslims. Khaybar was the third city in size after Mecca and Medina and was exclusively Jewish. According to Al-Qimni, at Khaybar, Muslim Mujahideen raped the Jewish women openly and shared them in orgies to the point where the Prophet forbade the rape of the pregnant Jewish woman. Muslims all over the Middle East and other parts of the world take extreme pride in the slaughter and rape of the Jewish of Khaybar and continue to shout and chant, Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud, Jaish Muhammad Yaud, Khaybar, Khaybar, O Jewish, the army of Muhammad will return soon. To this very day, it was at Khaybar that Muhammad raped the Jewish girl Safiya bint Huway after killing her father, husband, brother, and her relatives. He raped her while she was mourning her loss of family and killed it before her eyes. While this ruthless man was raping his victim, his bodyguard Abu Ayyub al-Ansari was guarding his tent with a sword in his hand. Later, Abu Ayyub confessed to his prophet, I scared that she might kill you because she is still kafira, infidel woman, and you have just killed her relatives. Al-Qimni noted it. The same behavior of the Quran toward the Christians after the need for Abyssinia, today Ethiopia, and it is Najashi, king of Abyssinia, was over. The revelation must say it is word toward the Christian dogmas, and hence the Quran declared the Christians as infidels because they considered Jesus to be divine and equated him with God. Hurub Dawlat al-Rasul Sayyid al-Qimni, 2001, page 367. When Muslims were few and began to be persecuted and killed by the Meccans, they fled to Abyssinia, and there they were welcomed and protected by the Christian king Najashi. According to many reliable Islamic sources, those Muslims who fled to Abyssinia had practiced taqiyya, lawful deception in Islam, before the Christian king Najashi. They purposely hid the fact that their new religion denied the incarnation, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Christ, and rejected and abhorred the Holy Trinity and the divinity of Jesus. After accusing the Jews of corrupting their holy scriptures and getting rid of them, Muhammad turned to Christianity and spewed his venom and hatred on his new target. There were hardly any Christians in his new state to be accused and killed. Nevertheless, Muhammad did more damage to Christianity than he did to Judaism, damaging the minds of Muslims, the creation of cruel hatred for Christians and their holy scriptures, the Gospels. He just accused the Jews of corrupting their holy scriptures without specifying where and when this corruption happened. But for Christianity, he purposely attacked the main foundation or fundamentals of the Christian faith. He aimed his attacks at the main pillars on which the main Christian doctrines are built. He did not only attack them, but he created retarded generations of followers who continuously ridiculed and made fun of Christian doctrines. It has been said that Christianity stands or falls with the divinity, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Muhammad spewed his venom on those essential Christian doctrines. He even claimed that God will curse everyone who believes in them. He also attacked the Holy Trinity. Then he vehemently rejected it and attacked the divinity, sonship, incarnation, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. See Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 171, Surah 5, verse 17. Furthermore, he claimed that his Allah condemns Christians as infidels who deserve hellfire because they believe in these doctrines. See Surah 5, verse 70 to 75, Surah 5, verse 116 to 117. While he was in Mecca, his Quran praised the Christians' gospel or Injil and considered the Christians as the people of the book, those who own a heavenly scriptures revealed by God. At this time, the Quran asserted that there is light and guidance in the Torah of Moses and the Gospel of Jesus. See Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 43 to 49. At the point when Muhammad fled to Medina, he altered his attitude and began to accuse them of corrupting the Gospel of Jesus. Like the Jewish, the Christians had suddenly corrupted it and changed their gospel. Accordingly, his Quran now included damning verses, abrogating its former assertions. Surah 5, verse 70 to 75, Surah 5, verse 116 to 117. The people of the book, the Christians, had now become kuffar, infidels, and virtue of it, deserving to be killed by Muslims because they believe that Jesus is the Son of God and God came in the flesh. God is the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Mother, Maryam or Mary. Surah 4, verse 171. Surah 5, verse 17. Muhammad had no correct knowledge of the doctrine of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, till his death. His knowledge came from an Arab Christian cult that revered Mary. The Quran does not only reject and condemn the divinity of Jesus, but also flatly denies the eternal existence of the Holy Spirit as God. He equates the Holy Spirit with the angel Gabriel. See Surah 19, verse 17, Surah 21, verse 91, Surah 66, verse 12, Surah 2, verse 87, Surah 2, verse 253, Surah 4, verse 171, and Surah 5, verse 110. It follows then that the Quran also denies the divinity of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit in the Quran is a merely created angel called Gabriel. Moreover, Islam rejects the fatherhood of God. Allah is the master to whom all human beings are slaves. No Muslim is allowed to address God as his heavenly father. The problem is not only the rejection and condemnation of the main Christian doctrines, but the serious accusation he directed against the Christians. He falsely claimed that the followers of Jesus Christ have corrupted it and changed his pure and true gospel, creating false doctrines of the Trinity, divinity, incarnation, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Christ. The Quran testifies Jesus as saying that he has not taught his followers these doctrines, but that his followers had created them after he ascended to heaven. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 116 to 117. This false accusation, if not read carefully, might sound just like a matter of differences between Muslim and Christian. Notwithstanding, history proved and continues to prove that this evil accusation has far-reaching fatal consequences for the followers of Jesus Christ. Christians are made the scapegoat for the so-called corruption of true Christianity and the assumed disappearance of the true divinely revealed Injil, the gospel of Jesus. We know that Jesus Christ himself did not write any gospel, but the four gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written by his disciples after his ascension to heaven. Nevertheless, Islam teaches that God has revealed a single gospel to Jesus, the same way he revealed one single Torah to Moses, one single Zabur or a Psalm to David, and one single Quran to Muhammad. Then it condemns and holds Christians guilty for causing that one single gospel to disappear and coming up with many different gospels and writings, 27 books of the New Testament, and falsely attributing them to Jesus Christ. This false accusation creates animosity and hatred in the hearts of Muslims toward the Christians and their New Testament. Today, in many Middle East Muslim countries, conversion to Christianity is a capital crime punishable by death. The malicious accusation also makes Muslims view Christians as condemning infidels who are following forged, changed, and corrupted books attributed to God. It is hardly surprising that they are called brothers of apes and pigs who deserve to be killed, their women, children, and properties, the rightful possession granted by Allah to Muslims, especially since they are on their way to hellfire. Without a single exception, Muslims all over the world believe that Christians have corrupted their Holy Bible and continue to corrupt it every day. Muslims imams implore in mosques, schools, colleges, and via radios and TVs, may Allah destroy the Jews and Christians, turn their wives into widows, cause their children to be orphans, and make their women, children, and properties booties to Muslims. Those hate preachers face no deterrent nor fear of criminalization for openly cursing the Jews and Christians and calling them brothers of apes and pigs. Their history books proudly record the global instance of Muslim mujahideen destroying and demolishing Christian churches, converting one of them into mosque. One outstanding example is the monumental church of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, today Istanbul in Turkey. It was constructed as a church at the orders of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I. Since 29 May 1954, 453 AD, it has been a mosque. Islamic heritage is full of assertions such as Muslim mujahideen warriors proudly saying, "We climb over the woman of the enemy," which means they were proud of raping the woman of their enemy. The fourth rightly guided Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib proudly said, "We drink water through the skulls of our enemies." Muslim invaders do not hesitate to slaughter Christian priests inside their churches. The Arab Orthodox Patriarch Sophronius of Jerusalem, who witnessed the rapid spread of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula and Levant and the fall of Jerusalem, described Muslim invaders as godless barbarians who burned churches, destroyed monasteries, profaned the crosses, and blasphemed against Christ and the church. Christians everywhere must take the Quran to a court of law and accuse it of inciting hatred against them and defaming them. They should charge it as a hate book which instigates Muslims to hate and kill them. That hate book inspired Muslim mujahideen to invade Christian lands and massacre 60 million Christians after their women, children, houses, and properties were seized by Muslims, and the women were gang raped. Many of the Middle East and North Africa countries such as Syria, Palestine, Israel, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Yemen, and Sudan were Christian countries before Muslims invaded it and conquered them by the sword and forcibly converted their inhabitants to Islam. Even the Persian Empire, today Iran and Iraq, were once Zoroastrian countries, and Muslims invaded them and forced their inhabitants to accept Islam at the pain of death. Half of the inhabitants of Afghanistan were Christians, and the other half were mixture of Zoroastrians, Buddhists, and Hindus before Muslims invaded and forcibly converted them all to Islam. The peoples of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh were pure Hindus before the Islamic conquest of the Indian subcontinent. The estimated human causalities of those bloody Islamic conquests or invasion were the deaths of 80 million Hindus. Today, there are 180 million Muslims in India, while Pakistan 200 million Muslims and Bangladesh 170 million Muslims have become completely Muslim lands. Indonesia was a Buddhist country before Islam came to it, but today there are 204,847,000 Muslims on that once upon a time Buddhist islands. Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country in the world. Based on the false accusation of Prophet Muhammad that the Jews and Christians are descendants of apes and pigs, Muslims believe that some of the monkeys and pigs today are direct descendants of Jews and Christians. There is an authentic hadith mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari which said that monkeys can commit adultery and get stoned because they are Jewish and Christian. Amir ibn Maimun said, during the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, I saw a she monkey surrounded by many monkeys. They were all stoning it because it had committed illegal sexual intercourse. I too stoned it along with them. Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith number 3849. Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar said in his commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari, Al-Ismaili narrated a longer version of this story with another chain of narrators in which Isa ibn Hattan narrated from Amr ibn Maimun that he said, I was in Yemen tending the sheep of my people up upon an elevation. A male monkey came as a female monkey and laid his head on her hand. Then a smaller monkey came and beckoned towards her. So she gently slipped her hand out from under the cheek of the first monkey and followed him. He mated with her while I looked on. Then she returned it and gently tried to slip her hand back under the cheek of the first monkey, but he woke up suddenly, smelled her, and cried out. Then the monkeys gathered around, and he began screaming while pointing towards her with his hand. The monkeys went all about and came back with that monkey that I recognized. They dug a pit for the two of them and stoned them both. So I had witnessed stoning being carried out by other than Adam's descendants. Fath al-Bari, Volume 7, page number 160. The Quran is the only religious book that attacks the religions of others and calls for their destruction. Muslims take great pride in destroying the places of worship of other religions or converting them into mosques, slaughtering the men, raping their women, enslaving their children, and possessing their properties and lands. Muslims strongly believe that their religion requires them to dispossess the infidels of their lands and occupy their countries. Islam teaches that every land that Muslim Mujahideen invaded it and occupied became a Muslim country forever. Based on this teaching, the so-called Palestinians, the descendant of the Arab Muslim invaders, claim that Israel is their Muslim land forever and the Jews have no right over it. Islam is the only religion that draws its legitimacy by condemning other religious books and their adherents. For Islam to be a true religion, Jews and Christians have to be liars and followers of corrupted religious books and untrue religions. For Muhammad to be the messenger of God, Jesus Christ has to cease to be divine and the Son of God. For Muhammad to be the final prophet of God to mankind, Jesus' crucifixion, death, and resurrection have to be null and considered the biggest lies in the history of mankind. For the Quran to be the word of God, the Bible has to be a corrupted word of God. In short, for Islam to be a true religion, Judaism and Christianity have to be false religions, and their followers are infidels who are not worthy to live. Their places of worship are either to be banned and destroyed or converted into mosques for Muslims. Their women had to be female slaves and raped by Muslim men without marrying them, and their children to be sold in the slave markets. ISIS, the Islamic Caliphate, is doing exactly what they have been instructed to do, true to the letter to their religious holy texts, the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. As we shall see in later articles, Muslims destroyed thousands upon thousands of Christian churches and monasteries and desecrated grave sites of Christian saints. Muslim terrorists today follow the example of the early Islamic mujahideen who destroyed places of worship and holy shrines of the followers of other religions such as Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, etc. ISIS, the newly founded Islamic Caliphate, had destroyed the tomb of the Old Testament prophet Jonah or Yunus in the city of Mosul, a biblical site holy to Christians and Jews. The Taliban in Afghanistan set an example when they destroyed the ancient statues of the Buddha in Bamiyan in 2001. Muslims should be proud of smashing idols. The Taliban leader Mullah Muhammad Umar said at the time, "It has given praise to God that we have destroyed them." Likewise, in the past as well as in recent years, Muslims have attacked religious places of worship, tombs, and defiled shrines in Asia, Africa, and Europe. History reveals that Islam considers Christians History reveals that Islam considers Christianity its arch enemy. If a Muslim becomes an atheist, secularist, communist, Satanist, or even if he stops believing in the Quran as the word of Allah, still he can live freely in a Muslim country and among Muslims, and no one will touch him or accuse him of apostasy. But the day the Muslim embraces Christianity, he can consider himself persona non grata. Everyone will consider him an enemy, traitor, and apostate. If he is lucky, he might be given 3 days to recant his apostasy, repent, and reconvert to Islam by uttering the two Shahada. After his repentance and public confession of the Islamic creed, he would be confined in one place, and his movements and behaviors would be monitored by everyone around him. He would never be allowed to travel anywhere, especially abroad in Western country. If he agrees to recant and repent, then he will be made to say in public, "I bear witness that there is no God except Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." If he refuses to recant and repent, then he will be killed, and his dead body will be disposed of in inhumane ways, usually burned to ashes. Islamic Sharia teaches that an apostate's dead body should not be buried in any Muslim graveyards, and that includes Christian and Jewish cemeteries too. When an apostate got killed, Muslim will say "Mata fatis," which means he died as an animal, and his dead body became like a carcass of a dead beast. Since the carcass of an animal is to be burned, the body of a dead apostate is to be burned into ashes. So no decent burial is allowed for an apostate from Islam. The fourth rightly guided Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib used to burn the apostates after killing them. In Sahih al-Bukhari it mentioned another Muslim apostatized and became a Christian. Ali ibn Abi Talib ordered him to repent, but he refused. Ali killed him and did not deliver his corpse to his family. They offered him a lot of money to do so, but Ali refused and burned the corpse, mentioned by Ibn Hazm, who referred to Sahih al-Bukhari. Another man from the tribe of Bani Ijil became a Christian. They brought him to Ali, chained in irons. Ali talked to him for a long time. The man said to him, I know that Jesus is the Son of God. Ali stood up and stepped on him. When the people saw that, they too stood up and stepped on him. Then Ali told them, kill him. They killed him. Then Ali ordered them to burn him. Mentioned by Ibn Hazm, who referred to Sahih al-Bukhari. The first rightly guided Caliph Abu Bakr as-Siddiq used to tell those whom he sent to fight the apostatized tribes, call them to re-embrace Islam. If they refuse, do not spare any one of them. Burn them with fire and kill them with force, and take the women and children as prisoners of war. Al-Tabari, Part 2, pages 258 to 258 and 272. While the commander of the Muslim army, Osama ibn Zayd, was preparing his troops to invade the Byzantine Christian lands, the Prophet Muhammad commanded him, attack them in the darkness of the dawn and fall on them, killing and burn them with fire and invade them and return with the booty. Ibn Kasir, Al-Bidayah al-Nihaya, pages 139, 143, and Al-Tabari, Tarikh al-Muluk wal-Rusul, pages 156. Muhammad and his followers did and continue to do every imaginable evil to destroy Christianity, Christians, and the Church of Jesus Christ. Nonetheless, Christianity continued, and it will continue forever to be the leading religion in the world. Islam was the fastest growing religion in the world, slowed down after the terrorist cowardly attacks on September 11, 2001, and halted it after the establishment of the Islamic Caliphate, which is known as ISIS. The gospel of Jesus will continue to be preached all over the world. The Holy Bible will continue to be produced in millions and all languages and distributed everywhere. A leading Catholic theologian, Hans Kung, wanted the Vatican to accept Muhammad as a true prophet of God. Thank God, the Roman Catholic Church rejected his demand. How can the Son of God, Jesus Christ, and the son of the devil, the lying jinni, have anything in common? If Satan can incarnate as a human being, or if he can have a son, I believe that had already taken place in the desert of Arabia in the year 570 AD when Muhammad was born. Sayyid Mahmud al-Qimdi also noted that when the Muslims were small in number and in a state of weakness in Mecca, the wise verses of the Quran suited their weakness among the hostile majority, and therefore the verses granted freedom of faith, and that there is no compulsory religion, and that the judgment should be left to Allah on the day of resurrection. Al-Ghimli's observations noted that after the immigration from Mecca to Medina, and after the battle of the Great Badr and the changing from the state of weakness to the state of power, came the abrogating verses to abrogate the freedom of faith and command Muslims to fight and kill non-Muslims. The foundation of Islam is erroneously attributed to Muhammad alone. However, as we shall see below, Islam has many founders. Many Arab poets and sages have contributed to the formation of the Arab religion. Even Muhammad's grandfather and great-grandfather made considerable contributions, which paved the way for the new religion. Muhammad simply combined the already existing religious ideas and practices that had been created by others and were known to the Arabs of his time. He was like the blind poet Homer, who compiled the ancient Greek mythologies in his epic poems of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Muhammad has nothing original except his misogynistic teaching against women the violent doctoring of jihad, spreading Islam by the sword, and the law of apostasy, killing those who forsake Islam. As we have mentioned above, Muhammad has borrowed to a large extent from Judaism, Christianity, Mandaeanism or Sabianism, Zoroastrianism, the Hanafiya sect, or the Arab monotheists of Mecca, the Jewish Talmud, some Christian apocryphal gospel, other Middle East religions, and the pagan Arab cult of his ancestor, the Arab polytheists of Mecca. Therefore, it is wrong to say that Muhammad is the sole founder of the Arab religion, which came to be known as Islam. The Quran made false claims regarding the existence of the city of Mecca and the building of its Kaaba by Abraham and his son Ishmael. The city of Mecca was not there at the time of Abraham. It came into existence only in the 4th century AD. Mecca was built in the 4th century AD by the Yemeni tribe of Khuza'a. None of the PC historians or omissions such as Herodotus, Pliny, Ptolemy, the military missions of Alexander the Great, or the Roman Empire missions, who either visited Arabia or wrote about the tribes and cities of that region, had mentioned a city by the name of Mecca. The founder of the Hanafiya religion was Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufil. He was the first Arab man to falsely claim that Abraham and his son Ishmael had built the Kaaba. Muhammad inherited this false claim and included it in his Quran. Muhammad was so influenced by the false Arab prophet and poet Umayyah ibn Abi Salt. Umayyah spoke about the legend of the she-camel of the legendary Arab prophet Saleh, which came out of a rock. Muhammad copied in his Quran that legend as Umayyah narrated it. Muhammad also included in his Quran 3 Arab prophets, Hud, Saleh, and Shu'aib. None of them ever existed. According to the Quran, those prophets were sent by Allah to the Arab tribes of Ad, Samud, and Midian, respectively. The Quran mentioned that those 3 Arab tribes rejected the prophets of Allah, and hence the angel Gabriel destroyed them through the shout. The Jewish Talmud, Madras Rabbah, is one of the sources of Muhammad about the legendary stories of the Jewish prophets. It was written in the 2nd century AD. Muhammad did not know or had never seen the Old Testament. Kanz Rabbah is another important source to Muhammad. It is a religious book of the Mandaeans. It mentioned that the angels and Satan were ordered by God to bow down to Adam at his creation. All the angels obeyed and prostrated before Adam except Satan. This myth is copied by Muhammad in his Quran. The Mandaeans also call it Sabians, revere some biblical characters such as Adam and his sons Abel and Seth, Noah and his son Shem, Aram, and John the Baptist, but rejected Abraham, Moses, David, and Jesus Christ. The Aramaic Manda means knowledge, as does Greek gnosis. Muhammad borrowed from Mandaeanism the rituals of prayers and fasting. The Mandaeans fasted 1 month in the year, and after that they celebrated a festival they call Eid al-Fitr. So Muslims do the same. The Mandaeans pray 5 times each day as Muslims do. Before each prayer, they do ablution, religious cleansing, and during their prayer, they do ruku' and sujood, bowing, kneeling, and prostrating to their God. So Muslims practice the same too. As we mentioned earlier, neither the Jewish nor Christian pray in that pagan way. Another Ibn al-Haris was the one who suggested testing Muhammad's claim of being the prophet of God. He sent a group of Meccans to the Jews of Yathrib. The Jews suggested three questions, of which two were based on well-known legends to the people of Arabia and Levant, today the Middle East, and Anatolia. The seven sleepers of the cave and Dhul-Qarnayn, the one of two horns. The third question was about the nature of the human soul. As we have seen, Muhammad failed to give answers to those simple questions and therefore exposed his falsehood. See the Quran, Surah Al-Isra 17 and Surah Al-Kahf 18. According to the Quran, Qarun, biblical Korah, had treasures that their keys were carried by strong men on 60 mules. See the Quran, Surah Al-Qasas 28, verse 76. Islam teaches that Korah used to transfer elements such as iron, brass, and bronze into gold and diamonds. He built many houses out of pure gold. Muhammad borrowed this exaggerated story of Korah from the Jewish Talmud and some writings of the Mandaeans. According to the Old Testament, Korah was one of the Jewish slaves who used to live under bondage in Egypt until God liberated them through Moses and Aaron and brought them to the promised land, today Israel. How could a slave be richer than his master, the Egyptians? According to the Old Testament, Korah and other Jews rebelled against Moses' leadership, and God punished them by opening the earth under their feet and burning them alive. According to authentic traditions, the Quran has undergone so much editing and revising that many of its verses and surahs went missing. Between these mumble-jumble stories and fables in the Quran, you will find one law for flogging the adulterer 100 lashes, another verse allowing an adult man to sleep with a female child as a wife, and yet another verse sanctioning the man to marry 4 women at the same time and sleep with any number of female slaves or female war captives. Yet another verse for cutting off the thief's hand. Many more verses ordering the faithful to wage jihad against the infidels, etc., etc., etc. Even if the Quran was composed by an illiterate old Arab woman, she might have narrated it in a better fashion. No one can claim to have understood such a confused and chaotic book without the help of the works of Muslim commentators and historians like Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, Al-Qurtubi, Ibn Sa'd, Ibn Hisham, Al-Bayhaqi, Al-Halabi, Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Ibn Majah, Malik, and many more. Scholarly research shows no written transcripts about Muhammad and his companions until 200 years after his death. It is no wonder that each one of the commentators will give you 10 different interpretations mentioned by the companions of Muhammad in an attempt to explain one verse of the Quran. You will never know who among the 10 companions got it right from Muhammad. Everything we know today about Islam is passed from one generation to the next generation by mouth. As is the nature of storytellers, people tend to add and subtract many things from the Quran, the Hadith, and the biography of the Prophet Muhammad. The first biography written about Muhammad by Ibn Ishaq, 700 of 770 AD is lost, and only a few quotations of it were found in the works of the next biographer, Ibn Hisham, who died in the year 833 AD, 200 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad, who died in the year 632 AD. Let us compare this with the four Gospels of Christ and the epistles of the New Testament. Today, all biblical historians agree that all the books of the New Testament, except the book of Revelation, were written before 70 AD. The historians base their conclusion on the fact that none of the four Gospels has mentioned the destruction of the Jewish temple by Titus Vespasian in the year 70 AD. It was a huge historical event that affected the lives of the Jews until today. The historians base their conclusion on the fact that none of the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, has mentioned the destruction of the Jewish temple by Titus Vespasian in the year 70 AD. It was a huge historical event that affected the lives of the Jews until today. The historian Flavius Josephus reported that the Roman army killed 1,300,000 Jews and taken as slaves 97,000 Jews. They destroyed the Jewish temple. The Jews who escaped the Roman massacre and capture were scattered all over the world. Therefore, if any of the Gospels or the epistles of the New Testament had been written after that historical event, then its author would be more than willing to mention it, because Christ prophesied the destruction of the temple. Jesus died in the year 32 AD, and all the four Gospels and the epistles of the New Testament were written less than 40 years from the time of his death, whereas Muhammad died in the year 632 AD, and the first reliable and complete biography of him was written 200 years after his death. This is one of the facts that led some modern Western critics to conclude that Prophet Muhammad never existed, and that whatever was written about him was the creation of later generations. Muhammad also borrowed many teachings and doctrine from the followers of the Hanafiya sect cult. In his book Al-Hizb al-Hashimi وتأسيس الدولة الإسلامية, the Hashemite Party and the Foundation of Islamic State, Dr. Sayyid Mahmoud al-Qimni traces the origin of the Islamic religion to Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad, who was a follower of the Hanafiya religion. If God wants to establish a state, he creates men like this, said Abdul Muttalib while pointing his hand toward his sons. Al-Qimni, 1996, page 51. According to Al-Qimni, the idea of creating an Islamic state based on Arab religion goes back to the grandfather of the Prophet. Abdul Muttalib understood that the Arab tribes were unable to be united into one kingdom because of the lack of tribal cohesion. In a kingdom, the ruling tribe would dominate other tribes, and no tribe would accept that. For that reason, the only way to unite the Arab tribes together was to have a king prophet to rule over them. Such a unity could not be resisted because it would be considered of divine origin. When he understood the problem, Abdul Muttalib borrowed the idea of the king prophet from the Jewish example of King David and his son King Solomon, and so he began his religion of Al-Hanafiya, a monotheist religion in pre-Islamic Arabia. Islam is believed to be a continuation of that religion, which he traced its origin to the ancestor of the Arabs, Abraham or Ibrahim. Furthermore, in tracing the origin of the idea of the Islamic religion or Islamic State, Al-Qimni went beyond Abd al-Muttalib to the great-grandfather of Muhammad, Qusay ibn Kilab. In the pre-Islamic period, many Arab tribes struggled to control the important city of Mecca. The tribe of Ibn Najjar took Mecca from the tribe of Qarban, and then the tribe of Madar defeated Ibn Najjar and captured the city. From the Madar, the control of Mecca passed to the Yemeni tribe of Khuza'a, and finally the Quraysh tribe under the leadership of Qusay ibn Kilab captured Mecca. Through deception, Qusay ibn Kilab bought the keys of the Kaaba, an ancient religious shrine in Mecca, which is called the House of Allah in Islam, from Ghabshan al-Khuzai in exchange for a bottle of wine. Al-Qimni, 1996, page 81, quoting from Ibn Kathir, page 194, and Ibn Hisham al-Sirah, page 109, 115. When he took control of the city and the Kaaba, Qusay founded Dar al-Nadwa, or House of Commons, page 82. Al-Qimni quoting Ibn Kathir, Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, page 192. Mecca became under Qusay a small state, and Dar al-Nadwa like a place of democracy for the Bedouin Arabs. According to Ibn Kathir, Qusay became a king and all the Meccan tribes became his subjects. In those days, Mecca was not the only city in Arabia to have a Kaaba. They were the Kaaba of Najran, the Kaaba of Shaddad al-Ayadi, and the Kaaba of Qaftan. Al-Qimni, page 65. Each Kaaba was erected to house an idol of a great tribal leader known as Rab, which means Lord, or housing a holy stone. Volcanic and meteoric stones were objects of worship of the Bedouin Arabs. The Arabs venerated these two types of stone because they believed the former erupted from the earth and the later fell from the walls of the house of God or Allah in heaven. Accordingly, the Kaaba of Mecca is housing a holy black stone to this day. Richard Burton, who pretended to be a Muslim, visited Mecca, took a small piece of the black stone and subjected it to scientific test. The test proved that the black stone was part of the shattered pieces of a meteor. Al-Qimni, page 25. The Islamic myth has many stories to tell about the origin of the black stone. One story says that when Adam was driven out of heaven, he took a stone from paradise and brought it down with him. The stone was so bright and white, but turned into black because it sucks the sins of those who kiss it every year during the Hajj rituals. Another story relates the black stone to Abraham and his son Ishmael. It is believed that Abraham and his son used the black stone as a ladder to build the present Kaaba. The black stone is also called Al-Hajar al-Az'ad, which means the happy stone. An important event took place in the year 569 or 570 AD, known to the Arabs as the Year of the Elephant, or Am al-Fil, which increased the importance of the Meccan Kaaba. Al-Qimni, page 76, quoting Al-Suhail and Ibn Hisham in his book Al-Rawt, page 77. The Assyrian leader Abraha tried to destroy the Kaaba, but could not succeed. The Islamic myth said that heavenly birds called Tayr al-Ababil stoned the invading troops. Despite that, the Egyptian essayist Abbas Mahmoud al-Aqad believed that the army of Abraha was struck by smallpox. Al-Qimni, page 76, quoting al-Aqad, تواليت بعثة البعثة المحمدية, pages 145 to 146. Al-Aqad drew his conclusion from the historical records of the Byzantine historian Brukov, who visited Mecca at the same time. The retreat of Abraha's troops made the inhabitants of Mecca believe that the god of the Quraysh tribe had fought for them. When Qusay ibn Kilab died, he left the inheritance of the Kaaba and the leadership of Mecca to his son Abdul Munaf. Then it passed to Hashim, the son of Abdul Munaf. Al-Qimni, page 90, quoting Al-Tabari, Al-Tarikh, page 123. After the death of Hashim, the leadership of Mecca and the Kaaba passed to Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of Prophet Muhammad. Al-Qimni, page 98. As soon as he became a leader, Abdul Muttalib began to lay the foundation for a new religion in which all hearts could be united in one God. Al-Qimni, page 99. He called it for the abolition of idols. God would not accept any supplication from a person except his good works. God was the God of Ibrahim, biblical Abraham, the father of all the Arab tribes and the Jewish tribes. Then Abdul Muttalib had a vision while he was sleeping in the courtyard of the Kaaba that the God of Abraham had commanded him to dig the well of Zamzam, a holy well in Mecca. Al-Qimni, page 100, quoting from Ibn Hisham al-Sirah, pages 136, 139. The well of Zamzam is near two idols of the Quraysh tribe named Asaf and Naila. Those two idols were placed in two mountains known as Al-Safa and Al-Marwa. The polytheist Arabs used to worship those idols. According to the Jordanian historian Dr. Rifat Amari, Asaf and Naila were the names of a real Jewish couple who claimed to be gods and made the Arabs worship them. After their deaths, the Arabs continued to worship them as Al-Safa and Marwa. Dr. Amari maintained that Asaf and Naila had sex inside the Holy Kaaba, and for that transgression, God punished them by transferring them into the two idols, Al-Safa and Al-Marwa. Muhammad incorporated in his Quran this pagan ritual of Al-Safa and Al-Marwa. Therefore, Muslims during the Hajj ritual run between the two mountains of Al-Safa and Marwa. Without performing those pagan runs, a Muslim pilgrimage is considered null. Without performing those pagan runs between Al-Safa and Marwa, a Muslim pilgrimage is considered invalid. According to the Arab historian Abu Zinad, who wrote in the year 747 AD, Hajj rituals and the fasting of Ramadan were pagan ceremonies practiced by the Arab Sabians and Haranians. Ramadan predated Islam. It originated in the ancient Arabian Baal worship. Muhammad's father and grandfather were pagans who worshipped the idol Baal. Muhammad followed the religion of his father and grandfather and fasted from childhood as a Baal worship believer. Therefore, from an early age, Muhammad practiced Hajj rituals, which were also part of the pagan Arabs' worship of the moon god Baal. Narrated Asim, I asked Anas ibn Malik, did you used to dislike performing tawaf between Al-Safa and Marwa? He said yes, as it was of ceremonies of the days of Jahiliyyah, days of ignorance, or a pre-Islamic period, till Allah revealed, verily, the two mountains, Al-Safa and Al-Marwa, are among the symbols of Allah. It is therefore no sin for him who performs the pilgrimage to Kaaba or performs Umrah to perform Tawaf between them. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 2, Book 26, page 710. See Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 158. The Arabian Bar religion is mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Hijj 22, verse 17, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 62, and Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 69. The Quran and the Hadiths incorporated many pagan practices of the Arab polytheists of Mecca and also borrowed extensively from the Sabians of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. The Sabians were also Arab tribes who observed fasting 30 days in the year during the month of Ramadan and prayed 7 times in the day. Islam retained 5 of them. Moreover, they celebrated 2 festivals or Eid in the year. The first one immediately after completing 30 days of fasting, and the second during their visit to Mecca for performing the Hajj rituals. Many Muslim historians, commentators, and scholars openly admitted that Islam is continuation of the pagan Arabs' Baal worship. See Ibn Hazm, Volume 1, page 34. Ibn al-Jawzi, page 84. Al-Maz'udi in Muruj al-Zahab, Volume 2, page 213. Ibn Hajar in Al-Asaba, Volume 4, page 315. And Tafsir al-Tabari, Volumes 5 and 16, page 6. Then Abdul Muttalib renounced all pagan worship and practices and asked the people of Mecca to return to the religion of Ibrahim or Abraham, which was the religion of Hanafiya. According to Al-Qimni, the religion of Hanafiya originated in Yemen, but the Arabs of Mecca somehow attributed it to Abraham, the father of the Jewish. When the month of Ramadan came, Abdul Muttalib would go to the cave of Hira and worship. The Prophet Muhammad claimed that the angel Gabriel appeared to him for the first time in this cave and gave him the first verses of the Quran. In pre-Islamic, this cave was called Khara, which means the cave of fishes, a place where the men of Mecca would go to answer the call of nature. In those days, Arabs had no toilets inside their tents. Abdul Muttalib also began to invite the people of Mecca to do good and refrain from evil because he believed in the resurrection of the soul and their judgment on the last day. Abdul Muttalib was not the first founder of the Hanafiya, but according to Al-Qimni, some people from Yemen founded the religion in the 1st century AD, in the 1st century before the birth of Christ. Al-Qimni, page 111, quoting from Dr. Jawad Ali Al-Mufassal, page 59, and Suraya Al-Manqus in her book Al-Tawheed, page 159. Abdul Muttalib did not know the origin of the Hanafiya and hence attributed it to the Hebrew prophet Abraham, quoting from Al-Fakhr al-Razi. The Yemeni people used to worship one god whom they call Ar-Rahman, quoting from Dr. Jawad Ali Al-Mufassal, page 59. The god Ar-Rahman is the planet Venus, which was worshipped by the Arabs of Yemen. The Quran considers the second name of Allah as Ar-Rahman and dedicated an entire surah to that Yemeni deity. Surah Ar-Rahman, number 55. Although Abdul Muttalib made so many religious claims, he did not claim to be the prophet of Allah. As we shall soon see, such a false claim was made by other Arab poets and sages, including his grandson Muhammad. Many people accepted the religion of Abdul Muttalib, and some of them made contributions to the new religion. The most important of those Hanafi followers were Qais ibn Sa'ad al-Ayadi, who invited the people to follow one God, who has not been begotten nor begot, and to whom all would return. Muhammad would later borrow this doctrine as it is and incorporated it in his Quran. Al-Qimni, page 112, quoting from Al-Shahrastani, Al-Milal wal-Nahl, 1951, page 96. Therefore, Ibn Sa'd al-Ayadi was the first one in the Arabian Peninsula to call for Tawheed or oneness of God. Suhail ibn Umair al-Mustalaq said, "Man had no hand in what befalls him, from good or bad. Everything was predestined by God," quoting from Al-Awsi, Bulugh al-Arab, page 219-259. Thus, Al-Mustalaq came up with the doctrine of predestination, which Islam would include it as one of its 6 pillars of faith. Huwayka ibn Zuhair al-Ayadi was the first Hanafi follower to claim to be a prophet of Allah. Al-Qimni, referring to Ibn Habib al-Mahabir, page 136, and Al-Awsi, Bulugh al-Arab, page 260. Huwayka used to go to a lower place in Mecca, climb a ladder, and tell people that God spoke to him in that place. Even so, Huwayka was not successful in his claim to be a prophet. Among the Hanafiya followers was Waraq ibn Nawfal. Waraq called people to worship the God of Abraham and followed the Hanafiya in the beginning, and then became a Christian, Nestorian Christian. He was the relative of the first wife of Muhammad, Khadija, and through him she confirmed the prophethood of her husband Muhammad through her ties. Al-Qimni, page 114, quoting from Ibn Hisham al-Sirah, pages 511 to 512. Al-Alaf ibn Shuhaib al-Tamimi believed in the oneness of God, the resurrection of souls, and the reward of good and punishment of evil. Al-Qimni, page 115, referring to Al-Awsi, Bulugh al-Arab, page 217. Furthermore, the Hanafiya followers used to practice circumcisions of boys and female genital mutilations of girls, pilgrimage to Mecca, ablution after sexual intercourse, rejection of idol worship, believe in one God in whose hands are good and bad, and that everything in the universe is predestined and written. Al-Qimni, page 116, quoting from Dr. Jawad Ali al-Mufassal, page 290. According to Sayyid Mahmud al-Qimni, the only missing things for the Hanafiya followers was the existence of a prophet. Al-Qimni, page 116. When the Hanafiya people understood the importance of a prophet, they began to compete among themselves as to which of them was going to be the prophet of God. They believed that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was going to send a final prophet to the descendants of Ishmael, the Arabs. They thought the prophecy would be revealed to the one who reached a high level of spirituality and holiness. Al-Qimni, page 117. One of those Hanafiya followers who was known for his spirituality, was Zayd ibn Umar ibn Nafail, who abstained from alcohol, eating dead animals, blood, swine, and everything which was slaughtered without calling on the name of Allah, or was dedicated to idols. Al-Qimni, page 118, quoting Ibn Hisham, As-Sira, page 206. Another Hanafiya follower was Umayyah ibn Abdullah ibn Abi As-Salt, who did not accept Islam because he expected the prophecy to come to him. Al-Qimni, page 121, quoting Dr. Jawad Ali, page Al-Mufassal, page 280-220. Ibn Hisham, pages 208-209, and Ibn Kasir, pages 206 and 208. When he was told that the Prophet Muhammad killed the people of Mecca in the Battle of Badr, he tore his clothes and wept and said if he was a prophet of God, he would not have killed his relatives. Al-Qimni, referring to Dr. Jawad Ali, pages 277, pages 377 to 378 and 383. Dr. Said Mahmoud Al-Qimni mentioned many poetic verses and composed by these last two followers of the Hanafiya sect, which were incorporated into the Quran. Al-Qimni, pages 118 to 123. The following are some examples from the verses that Umayyah ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Salt had composed and were incorporated into the Quran about Ibrahim or Abraham when he dreamed of slaughtering his son Ishmael. Umayyah said, "O my son, I have given you as an offering to God. Have patience that Allah may redeem you." The son replied by saying that everything belongs to Allah without exception. Do what you have been promised to do to Allah, and do not look at my blood covering my clothes. And while he was removing the clothes from his son, Allah released his son with halal, or a permissible sheep. This story is borrowed from the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, but the Holy Bible mentioned God has ordered Abraham to offer his son Isaac on the altar as sacrifice to God, and not Ismail. However, Umayyah Abi Salt has changed Isaac to Ishmael. He did that deliberately because the Arabs believed themselves to be the descendants of Abraham through his son Ishmael. Muhammad inherited this deliberate change and incorporated it into his Quran. About Mary, or Maryam, and her son Jesus, or Isa, Umayyah ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Salt said, "And in your religion, for the Lord of Mary is a foretelling about the servant Jesus, the son of Mary, descended to her after her people fell asleep, a messenger who did not confine or hide. He said, do not scare or disbelieve the angels from the Lord of Ad and Jerhim. I'm a messenger from Ar-Rahman to bring to you a son." She said, "How can I have a son when I have not been a bad woman, or a pregnant, or a woman of low esteem?" About Moses and Aaron and their story with Pharaoh, he said, "Out of your goodness and mercy, you made Moses a prophet. You said to him, 'Go, you and Aaron, to Pharaoh,' who became arrogant. Say to him, 'Have you made the earth without mountains to protect it?' And say to him, 'Have you made the sky without supporting pillars?'" About the resurrection day, he said, "When they appear before the owner of throne, who knows what is hidden and what is revealed, when we come to him, he is compassionate God, and his promises fulfilled. And the sinners were taken bare naked, where there is their condemnation. They do not die to take rest, and they remain in the sea of fire. Those poetic verses were copied as they were in the Quran of Islam. Quoting the words of Dr. Jawad Ali Al-Qimni states, there is great similarity and agreement between the views and beliefs of this poet and what has been mentioned in the Holy Quran regarding the description of resurrections, day, paradise, and hell. More than that, we find in the poetry of Umayyah the same verses and the same construction of sentences appear in the Quran and the book of Hadiths. Of course, we cannot assume that Umayyah had taken from the Quran because the Quran had not yet been revealed. And concerning his death in the 9th year of Hijrah, we cannot also assume that he had stolen the verses of the Quran because the Quran had not yet been fully revealed. Al-Qimni, pages 123 to 124, quoting Dr. Jawad Ali Al-Mufassal, pages 284 to 384 to 385. In conclusion, Muhammad has taken verses of Umayyah and included them in his Quran, which he falsely claimed to be inspired by Allah through his angel Gabriel. Along with the Hanafiya faith, Al-Qimni spoke briefly about the religion of Al-Sabiya or the Sabians. According to him, the followers of the Sabiya used to pray many times in the day, and those prayers were compulsory. They used to do qiyam, standing, and ruku', kneeling, and prostration, do ablution before each prayer, and wash their bodies after sexual intercourse, and they have conditions that define the ablution. Al-Qimni, page 111, quoting from Mahmud al-Aqad, 1967, page 144, the appearance of the awaited prophet. After this background, Al-Qimni said, and after that Muhammad, praise and peace of Allah be upon him, began to follow the step of his grandfather Abdul Muttalib to the cave of Hira, and this cave was changed into a holy place and entered history, and he believed in the Hanafiya, and before he reached the age of 40, he concluded the matter by declaring himself to be the prophet of the Ummah or Islamic community after the God of Abraham was revealed to him. Al-Qimni, page 132. From the preceding narrations, it becomes quite clear that Muhammad borrowed religious ideas and practices from other religions and also from his contemporary Arab sages and poets. Muhammad was merely a collector of the religious teachings of others, included them in his Quran and Hadiths after claiming to be a prophet of God. As we saw, many false prophets appeared before him, but none of them were able to succeed in forming a new religion. Initially, Muhammad also failed to form a new religion. He preached his new religion for 13 years while he was in the city of Mecca, and he was unable to gain more than 73 followers. But when he fled to Yathrib, meaning Medina, formed his Mujahideen fighters and made his religion compulsory, he began to gain more followers, and more followers because they were forced to accept his religion by the sword and kill anyone who dared to apostatize from Islam. Therefore, fear of his sword and tempting material gains, such like properties, cattle, and women and children of the infidels, contributed to the success of this new religion. Muhammad gave his followers the right to kill infidels and own their money, women, children, livestock, and lands. Therefore, the teaching of jihad Spreading this Arab religion by the sword forces people to accept Islam. Accordingly, many Arabs joined this Arab Robin Hood for material gain, spoils, and women of the so-called infidels. The best way to conclude this article is to quote the words of the Byzantine Emperor Manuel II, who said, "Just show me what Muhammad brought that was new, and you will find there is nothing but evil and inhuman things, such as his order of spreading with a sword the religion he preached." Yes, there is nothing new that Muhammad presented to the world except the violent doctrine of jihad and spreading Islam by the sword throughout the world, the law of apostasy in killing those who left his religion, and of course his evil misogynistic teachings against women and followers of other religions. About the the writer of this article, Dr. A. Ahmed is an author and scholar. He holds 5 university degrees, BA, MA, and doctorate in philosophy and comparative studies of religion from India, and bachelor and master degrees in religious studies and philosophy from Canada. He was born and raised a Muslim, but through his studies of philosophy and comparative studies of religions, he converted to Christianity. He has a unique writing style that can break through any religious, social, and cultural barriers and reveal the truth as it is. In addition, his books rely on an eyewitness because he witnessed with his own eyes the dire difficult condition that Muslim women live in. He has written 25 books, but has so far published 10. He wrote his novels in English and translated them into Arabic. All of his books revolved around women's issues in Islamic societies and terrorism in Islam. His books are free to listen to on his pages on YouTube website, and he narrates them in his own voice.